Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
I'm John Strum, and this is RealTalk MS. It's November 13th, and we have a lot to talk about. Last week was Election Day in the U.S., and if you're a regular listener, you've probably grown tired of hearing me say that healthcare was on the ballot. Well, the good news is that it appears that healthcare won, and it's unlikely that we'll see a further legislative effort to repeal the Affordable Care Act, at least for the next 2 years. So let me say thank you to everyone who demonstrated their MS activism and voted. Each of you became a difference maker. And I also want to share with you that in the 2 weeks leading up to the election, more than 6,000 people visited the RealTalk MS website and used the MS Congressional Report Card to see what sort of a grade their elected officials earned when it came to representing the interests of the MS community. In fact, when I look at the number of people who checked the MS Congressional Report Card and I read some of the really positive feedback that I received, well, you've motivated me to update the MS Congressional Report Card and bring it back for another appearance as we close in on the 2020 election. So in a couple of years, you can expect to see the new and improved MS Congressional Report Card back on the RealTalk MS website. Regular RealTalk MS listeners know that I often talk about being an informed healthcare consumer. You sometimes hear the expression that knowledge is power. Well, I believe that knowledge is also empowering, and you can't help but feel a sense of confidence and empowerment when you're part of the decision-making that determines your medical treatment. Especially when you or a loved one is living with MS or any chronic illness for which there may not be a cure, but there are a multitude of treatment options. As my wife's caregiver, I'm not sure how we could choose one medication over another or one symptom treatment option instead of another unless we could make informed decisions with her doctor. And that requires that you do some homework. And sometimes it can feel like a lot of homework. I know there have been times when I felt as if I were slowly crawling my way through the You Too Can Be a Neurologist home study course. But when you're making choices that can have an impact on you or your loved one's sense of well-being and quality of life, well, I only hope that you'll be suitably motivated to want to do that homework. This idea of making collaborative decisions with your doctor is what patient-centered healthcare is all about. It's a philosophy that really began gaining traction around the 1970s, and the concept of patient-centered healthcare became even more important with the establishment of the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, a non-governmental institute which was created by Congress as part of the modifications to the Social Security Act by clauses in the Affordable Care Act. The Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, or PCORI, has not only defined what patient-centered healthcare is or should be, but it's shined a bright light on the substantial benefits of patient-centered research. Patient-centered research is based on an understanding that patients themselves have unique perspectives that can help to mold, change, and improve the work of finding answers to clinical questions. In other words, patient participation that goes beyond just sharing health and medical data. But this kind of participation can add real value to medical research. And one of the very significant drivers of patient-centered MS research is I Conquer MS, which is, by its own definition, a people-powered research network. Just a few weeks ago, I Conquer MS and the pharmaceutical company EMD Serono made a bit of history by launching the first patient-driven MS drug development research project. My guest on the podcast today is Laura Kolaczkowski, the co-principal investigator for I Conquer MS, and we're going to make each of you an expert on patient-centered MS research and talk a bit more about what this patient-driven drug development project is all about. But before we get to my conversation with Laura, there are a few other things that you should know about. It's November, which means three things. Thanksgiving is almost here, the winter holiday of your choice is right around the corner, and it's flu season. And flu season brings us to the always controversial question of whether or not people living with MS should get a flu shot. Now, it's not really clear to me why this is any sort of a controversy. The answer, in most cases, is yes, but you don't have to take my word for it. You can check with the National MS Society because they recommend getting a flu shot if you're more than 6 months old. And I think that would be about 100% of the listeners to this podcast. Or you can check with the Centers for Disease Control, but they're pretty busy. So you just might want to check with your primary care physician or your neurologist. If you're on most disease-modifying therapies, you'll probably be told that getting a flu shot is a good idea. Now, there's a timing issue associated with Limtrada, but that's why you want to check with your doctor so that you can make an informed decision. Contrary to popular opinion, getting a flu shot doesn't give you a mild case of the flu, or any case of the flu. But some people with MS may feel a little less than 100% for a few days, which to me is still way better than you feel if you actually get the flu. So don't worry about the social media posts that say otherwise. That's just bad information coming from unreliable sources. And that's not what you want to base your healthcare decisions on. The MS Society recommends it, the CDC recommends it, and your neurologist will probably recommend it. Now, those are all highly reliable sources, so consider their recommendation and get your flu shot. It beats being sick. And just to be clear, when I talk about getting a flu shot, I'm talking about the injectable flu vaccine, not the nasal spray, which the CDC reminds us, and I'm quoting now, should not be used by people who have a neurologic disease or whose immune system is compromised due to any cause, nor by their caregivers. So, people with MS and their caregivers should avoid the nasal flu spray or the nasal mist flu spray, and instead, make sure you get the injectable flu vaccine. So please get your flu shot, and your holidays will probably be a little bit happier and a little healthier as a result. Making healthy lifestyle choices is good for everyone. If you're already pretty healthy, then smart lifestyle choices ensure that you'll probably stay that way longer. And if you're living with MS, more and more research points to the fact that smart lifestyle choices ensure that you'll be living your best life. We've seen data that makes a fairly conclusive case that smoking, obesity, and a sedentary lifestyle all work against you. They complicate your quality of life and they accelerate your MS progression. So things like exercise can make a difference in your overall well-being. But a small research study indicates that all exercise isn't exactly equal, and there are some types of exercise that may prove more beneficial than others to people living with MS. One of the common challenges that people living with MS face is a decline in sensory motor function. This leads to a lack of coordination, the loss of static and dynamic balance control, and impaired gait. Well, in healthy people, ballet is known to improve balance, an ability to sense the body's position and motion, sensory motor networks, and coordination involving complex movement. And researchers at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign wondered if those benefits would extend to people living with MS who had compromised motor function. So, with a grant from the National MS Society, the research team used a targeted ballet program that was designed to improve motor control and balance in women with mild to moderate relapsing remitting MS. It was a small study. They recruited 10 women between the ages of 36 and 65 who had demonstrated mild to moderate restriction in their movement. The women attended the 60-minute ballet program twice a week for 16 weeks. And the program incorporated aspects of classical ballet, and the exercises were designed to improve both static and dynamic balance and movement. Each participant was evaluated for balance and motor control before starting the ballet exercise program and after completing it. Researchers also measured the smoothness of movement during a 5-meter walk and balance in a step-to-stand task. Well, the results of the study showed improvement in every area that was measured. Balance was improved by 42%, and movement relating to posture and gait showed a 58% improvement. Given these better-than-anticipated results, the research team is recommending that dance should be incorporated into MS rehabilitation programs. And if you'd like to review the details of this very innovative rehabilitation study, I'll include a link in today's show notes. Pharmaceutical company Genentech has launched Floodlight Open, a study that uses your smartphone to measure how you perform simple tasks with the aim of understanding the effects of MS on your brain, hands, and body. Participating in Floodlight Open is simple. You begin by downloading the free app and signing the consent form so that your data can be collected. Then you'll perform some simple tasks daily or as often as you can, and you'll be able to use the app, or you can go online to see how your performance changes over time. The tasks that you'll be performing have been designed by physicians to measure cognition, hand motor function, and mobility. Your individual data will be anonymized and added to a data set that will be open to scientists who may want to incorporate that data into their own research. And you'll still have the option of sharing your own data with your neurologist by providing them with your private ID number in the study. And this can provide your neurologist with more detailed and useful information than they could ever hope to collect by simply asking you, "So, how have you been?" In addition to building a large anonymous and open data set that will be available to the research community, Genentech is launching Floodlight Open to measure the value of using a smartphone to track, measure, and monitor MS symptoms and health over time. And this can contribute to the development of technology-driven tools that will actually pave the way toward personalized medicine, where your data, automatically captured in the background as you go about the tasks of daily living, can help your physician in identifying the most beneficial treatment options for you. If you're interested in finding out more about Floodlight Open or even signing up to be a part of the project, you'll find a link in today's show notes. The FDA recently approved the first 7 Tesla MRI scanner in North America for clinical use. The scanner is installed at the University of Southern California's Mark and Mary Stevens Neuroimaging and Informatics Institute, and this is good news for people living with MS and other neurological conditions. And it's good news because this MRI scanner is 4 times as powerful as a standard MRI, which means that it can capture images with higher contrast, resolution, and detail. That means that doctors will not only see things that could otherwise be missed, but they can start to pinpoint exactly what's happening at the cellular level. To give you an example of how this new MRI scanner can improve treatment for people living with MS, there's ongoing research right now that's being funded by the International Progressive MS Alliance, and it's designed to identify an imaging biomarker for disease progression in progressive MS. The hypothesis driving this study is that an MRI scan can reveal a biomarker for progressive MS before progressive MS can be detected by a neurologist during a clinic visit. And the sooner progressive MS can be identified, well, the sooner treatment can begin. So Dr. Doug Arnold from McGill University and his team of investigators from the Netherlands, the UK, the United States, and Switzerland are successful in identifying this imaging biomarker. Well, technical advances like the 7 Tesla MRI scanner will one day make it far easier for imaging specialists to qualify and quantify whether that biomarker can be seen in someone's MRI scan. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines the word manifesto as a written statement declaring publicly the intentions, motives, or views of its issuer. Well, the National MS Society has just issued a video manifesto for the MS movement. It's a powerful video called We Believe, and I believe that the MS Society has done an absolutely amazing job of giving voice to the strength and resolve of their mission to support people affected by MS so that they can live their best lives until we're living in a world that's free of multiple sclerosis. You can't help but be inspired by this video. I'll have a link to the video in today's show notes, and I really want to recommend that you take a moment to check it out. It's 2 minutes and 24 seconds of powerful people sharing a very powerful message. In a moment, my guest Laura Kolaczkowski, the co-principal investigator for I Conquer MS, will join me for a conversation about how and why patient-driven research can make a real difference in the overall quality of medical research, and how the first patient-driven MS drug development project came to be, and what it might accomplish. My guest on the podcast is Laura Kolaczkowski, and I have to confess, I've been looking for a good reason to have Laura on as a guest ever since I first launched RealTalk MS. Laura spent 26 years at the University of Dayton until MS forced her medical retirement, but it doesn't seem to have slowed her down. Her articles appear in Multiple Sclerosis News today. She's a sought-after speaker, a major MS advocate, a blogger, and a voice from the MS community that commands attention and demands to be heard. Laura is also the co-principal investigator for I Conquer MS. So welcome to the podcast, Laura.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate the invite to join you today and talk about what I find exciting in the world of patient-centered research.
Yeah, I thought we could talk about two things today. First, we can talk about patient-centered research, which then brings us to this recently announced first-of-its-kind collaboration between I Conquer MS and EMD Serono, but that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. So let's start at the beginning. Can you talk about what patient-centered research is and how I Conquer MS serves as a kind of a hub for patient-centered MS research?
You know, John, for years, I always sat back and I looked at research results that came out and said, well, wasn't that a fun study? But why did they choose that topic? I wonder what person with that condition they talked to, did they come up with this question? And then as I was diagnosed with MS and I started reading MS studies, I'm like, really, did they ever talk to a person with MS to see if this was important to them? And I think it kind of hit a crescendo with me when I read the results of a study that literally it said people with multiple sclerosis fall more often than people without MS. And I thought, okay, it's time out here. Obviously, this researcher doesn't know anything about being patient-centered and finding out what patients need to know. Because I think obviously most of us with MS know we may fall more often. But what we really want to know is what makes us fall. Why do we fall? What can we do to prevent us from falling? So there's such a difference. So to back up here, to talk about patient-centered research, I would really like your listeners to understand that as a person with a chronic condition, we are the expert. We're the expert about the disease. We're the expert about daily living with it. We're the experts on the quality of our life and how that's affected by this disease. Beyond us being the expert, then our partners, our family, our spouses, whoever might be in close contact with us, those are also the experts. We know what affects our multiple sclerosis. We may not know the terminology that you learn in medical school or in a research lab, but we know our disease, and we know our bodies, and we know what we want to know. So that puts us at the center, I think, of research conversations where we can identify what's important to us. And then researchers can help us find the answers that are going to be impactful and useful to us, because it did no one any good to know that people with multiple sclerosis fall more often. If that researcher had looked at why we fall and how to prevent those falls, that would have been a patient-centric approach to research.
So what is the role that I Conquer MS occupies when it comes to patient-centered MS research?
A patient-powered research network is where people who are affected by a condition are at the core of everything that's decided to be done. With I Conquer MS, we now have over 4,600 people located worldwide who are affected by MS, who are a part of our patient-powered research network. And I really shouldn't say patient-powered. We're people-powered because we're not patients, we're people. But the people-powered research networks, we form this nucleus of volunteers who not only are willing to volunteer to share their medical data and share their thoughts on their experiences of living with the disease, but they're also sharing their thoughts about research. What are the research questions they would like answered? What are the topics that they're willing to support? What research out there are they willing to step up and say, yes, I would be interested in learning more? With I Conquer MS, we're not doing, within our network, we're not doing pharmaceutical drug development per se. We're looking at research that, again, goes to the quality of life for people living with the disease, or the activities of daily living, which then reflect back to our quality of life.
The answer to this question may seem obvious to you, Laura, but I want to ask it because the concept of patient-centered research is still a new way of thinking about research for a lot of people. So let me ask you, what in the research process has to change, or what things have to be in place in order to successfully integrate patient participation and the patient perspective?
I think first and foremost is a change of mindset within the various stakeholders in the research process, bringing the person with the condition, the person with multiple sclerosis, to the research agenda as an equal stakeholder with the scientists, with the researchers, with our funders, with our healthcare providers, with the drug developers, and, of course, our payers with the insurance system. That's really a key first step. And this is what we've seen over the past few years. I'm not sure how many people are aware that over the past 4 to 5 years, the Federal Drug Administration, the FDA, has been actually holding patient-focused drug development conversations and meetings that are in disease-specific areas. We have not had one done on multiple sclerosis, but the ones that they have done have produced really valuable information as to what research people with their conditions want done and would find helpful. The shift in thinking in the research community, it's coming about, and it's coming about because of organizations that are these PPRNs that were funded through PCORI. The more researchers work with patient networks, the more they see the value in it, the more they understand it, and the more they go out and back into their own communities and say, hey, there's this opportunity to work with people who have the condition or invested who will help you advance further. One of the organizations I've been involved with is the Drug Information Association, or DIA. And as I talk to those people there, I tell them it makes sense to include a patient perspective from day one when you're talking about developing a drug. Because if you get our perspective and our help in understanding what's important, how to conduct a clinical trial, what are the obstacles that keep people from participating in a trial, get the enthusiasm within the community for your product, we can help you get people enrolled quicker, sooner, get through that process of clinical trials are extremely complex, and get to that end point a lot quicker if you involve the patients at the very beginning. Because there's got to be nothing more frustrating for a researcher to design a trial and then not be able to get people to sign up for it. And they sit back and they say, gee, well, why didn't anybody want to help us out with this? And you look at the obstacles, say, in trial design, and if you talk to patient groups such as our group within iConquer MS, we will help a researcher identify what are the strengths and the weaknesses in their design and help them understand why it's important to come to our side of the perspective. One of the things about multiple sclerosis, as we all know, it's predominantly a female disease. So you got 75% of the people who have multiple sclerosis are likely to be women. And because it's diagnosed at an age when you're most productive in childbearing years, there's a pretty good chance that those women who you want to participate in and study in your research perhaps have children. But, researchers, have they ever thought about what's the obstacles to getting a woman who has school-age children? What do we do to assist with babysitting? What do we do to assist with the child care needs? What do we do to assist with transportation for people who don't drive to get back and forth? Those are all the perspectives that a person with a disease can help researchers from early on in their design address, so they can overcome those obstacles earlier and sooner in their trial. Because ultimately, what they want and what we want should be the same thing, and that is something to improve our lives.
Everything you just said sounds like so much common sense. What are the most challenging obstacles to expanding patient-driven research?
From my perspective, it's the publicity. It's really hard to get the word out. I would love to see us do, I'm of the age, it used to be there were always public service announcements on TV. Every channel was required to donate so much airtime to public service announcements. I would love to see a PSA that says, hey, you can help change the world in medical research by joining one of these patient-powered research networks. You can make a difference. So to me, for the community side, I think it's that publicity, getting the word out there that we exist. From the clinician side, because doctors and nurses, they really help to drive what happens in patient-centered research as well through their discussions with the people that they see in their offices. And from their side, one is, of course, that ever-present demand on their time during office visits. Clinic contact time is really difficult for them to squeeze in one more thing, and talking about getting involved with something like iConquer MS is going to be at the very bottom of their list. So that's a big obstacle, is how do we get that recognition from the clinical side that the people that they're in contact with could and want to help, and here's how you can help, and sharing that information. And there's always that pushback then from the academic side and the clinical and the research side that presents themselves as the experts. Now, they're the experts in what is a T cell, what's a B cell, what are all these long names that very few of us who don't have medical degrees can even pronounce. And they want to present that they are the expert in this disease. And my argument is, no, they're an expert in the pharmacology, they're an expert in biology, they're expert in, all those different parts of it, but the person with the disease is the expert. So we've got that little bit of headbutting going on there. And I recently had the opportunity to do a presentation to the National MS Society, and I did it. I tried to do it in a lighthearted way, but I showed a graphic that showed the good old days that there used to be that moat around the castle that kept us out, and no one ever lowered that gate and invited us to come into the castle, and it's a big castle holding all those researchers. But then all of a sudden we've got people who've become empowered and knowledgeable about their conditions and want to make a difference and know that they can contribute. And we're storming the castle, and they can't keep us out now. So they better lower the gate and just welcome us in, because we're coming whether they like it or not. And I think part of that is recognized in what the FDA is doing now with holding additional hearings on patient-focused drug development and actually writing that into the requirements of future clinical trials.
So this is a good time, I think, for us to move from the concept of patient-powered research in general to patient-driven drug development specifically. What does that mean, and how will the recently announced collaboration between iConquer-MS and EMD Serono work?
We have had a wonderful opportunity presented to us at iConquer-MS, and that EMD Serono, which is a division of Merck, they came to us and asked, would we be willing to work with them in helping understand patient-reported outcomes and how those, they're referred to as PROs, or patient-reported outcomes, could be incorporated into a clinical trial design for them for a drug that they're working to bring to market here in the U.S. And this is before it's coming even to the FDA. Then we had the opportunity to go back to our community with iConquer-MS, and we sent out an email to those people who have supported iConquer-MS by contributing their data. They received an email from us that said, hey, we have a company who has come to us, and they are interested in the average person's perspective on what's important in designing this trial. We sent that out. We got a great response immediately. And then using the criteria that Merck supplied to us that we worked through with demographics and age and location and that, we were able to seat an excellent panel of 8 people in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s year olds, and ethnically diverse group as well, male, female represented, to come together and form a patient-focused drug development council with them for their new multiple sclerosis drug that they're working to get certified through the FDA.
Well, that sounds incredibly exciting. What's next there? What are next steps?
Well, it is exciting. Well, our first step that we had beyond soliciting the community and getting this panel together is we had an in-person meeting where we spent a couple days with executives from EMD Serono outside of Boston, and had that opportunity to have conversations with what would we rate as important, what functions. You know, we talk about a lot of times in clinical trials, everything's measured to the 25-foot walk test. If you really think about it, when you talk to people within the community, a lot of times if you have to choose, which would I rather measure, which is better for me, is it going to affect my hand use or my leg use? People would prefer to know that the drug that they're taking is going to improve their hands, that walking may not be the most important. So we were able to, like, the 8 people that were there on the council meeting, we went through a whole bunch of symptoms of discussing, rating, what's important, what would be significant, what wouldn't be. And then the people in EMD were able to ask us questions about our perspective on those. Social interaction for them was really, I think, that was one of the key points we talked about. I think that caught them off guard is the isolation that many people feel with having a chronic disease like multiple sclerosis. How could they measure that? We're not sure. But that's a patient-reported outcome that they're looking at ways to incorporate into their study design. So if they can capture that information, if a drug makes you feel better, feel less fatigued, better to get out into your community and interact with other people, that social interaction piece should show improvement. And that's something that doesn't get measured normally because we're so busy stuck on measuring how fast can we walk how fast can we walk 25 feet, or what improvement do we have on the expanded disability scale.
If people listening to our conversation want to find out more about participating in the people-powered work that I Conquer MS is doing, they can visit the website at iconquerms.org. Laura Kolaczkowski, thank you for your tireless advocacy and for all your efforts on behalf of people affected by MS, and thanks for talking to me today.
Thank you, John, and I hope everyone listening will go to their computer or their mobile device and join us at iConquer MS, because we have many more exciting opportunities that are going to be coming up where we'll be looking for members of our community to step up, volunteer, raise their hand, and inject their perspective and their experiences and help shape research so it will be meaningful and impactful for people living with multiple sclerosis. So thank you very much, John, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. If you haven't yet, don't forget to visit the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download the Real Talk MS app for your iOS or Android smartphone or device. It's the easiest way for you to connect to the podcast. And the app allows me to share all sorts of bonus content with you. So I hope you take a moment and download the app today. My name is John Strum. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.